I'm kind of blacklisted. I haven't gotten a studio job in 15 years.
So you feel in a way that you are banned from the...
No, not in a way.
You are?
Yeah, I think.
Imagine this. One day you're everywhere. Your face is plastered on billboards. Your voice echoes through every movie trailer. And your name, it's lighting up Hollywood like a marquee. You're not just in the movies. You are the movie. Then, just like that, you're gone. No scandal, no farewell, no explanation. Just gone. Like the curtain dropped and no one bothered to raise it again. That's exactly what happened to Val Kilmer. He didn't fade. He vanished like a magician's final trick, leaving behind nothing but questions. And for years, fans and insiders alike kept asking what really happened. Now Mel Gibson is finally breaking the silence. And the truth, it's darker, it's messier, and it's nothing like what you've been told.
I have an answer for us. It's been a while.
Cut to a final image. Val Kilmer in the cape and cowl. One last photo posted on Instagram before everything changed. But Val Kilmer was never just another actor. He was the youngest person ever admitted into Juilliard's drama program. A force of nature, theater-trained, brilliant, and bold. He had that rare mix of charm, danger, and mystery that casting directors drool over. Yeah, he had an ego. But when you've headlined hits like Top Secret, Top Gun, The Doors, and Tombstone, well, you've earned the right to walk a little Morrison. So real, fans thought Morrison had come back from the grave. And in A-list. But right after that, something strange happened. When it came time to shoot the next film, Batman and Robin, Val just wasn't there. No send-off, no press release. Just replaced, quietly, by George Clooney. And nobody said a word, not a whisper. Until years later, when director Joel Schumacher finally broke the silence. And what he said was brutal. He called Val psychotic, said he was spoiled, overpaid, impossible to work with. He even joked that Val didn't speak to him for 2 weeks, and that it was the best 2 weeks of the shoot. But here's the thing, since when does being difficult get you erased from Hollywood? Let's be real. Plenty of actors have been worse, yelling at crews, walking off set, even throwing punches, and they still win Oscars. So what made Val different? According to Mel Gibson, it wasn't about behavior, it was about power and control. Val Kilmer didn't kiss the ring. He questioned the system. He refused to play the game. And in an industry built on loyalty and silence, Val was too bold, too honest, too unpredictable. Hollywood doesn't always punish bad behavior, but it does punish those who won't follow the script. And Val, he didn't just ignore the script, he burned it. And that's when the whispers started. The quiet ones, the kind that don't make headlines, but kill careers. No one needed to say his name. No blacklist was printed, but doors stopped opening. And that's what happened to Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer didn't just stop landing leading roles. He was blacklisted, not publicly, not with headlines or controversy, but quietly, completely. And worst of all, he knew it. In one rare, painfully honest interview, Val didn't dance around the truth. When asked if people found him hard to work with, he didn't get defensive. He just smiled a little and said, "What's one step past difficult? Impossible. Yeah, I think I'm kind of blacklisted. I haven't had a studio job in 15 years. The host pressed, "So, you feel like you've been banned?" Val nodded. "No, not feel like. I am." But there wasn't bitterness in his voice. No anger. Just honesty. A kind of weathered humility that only comes after years of silence. He admitted he had made mistakes, that he used to speak up too much, complain too often, and most of all, he misunderstood the industry he thought he loved. He thought it was about the art. He believed that passion, creativity, and bold ideas would carry him through. But Hollywood, he learned, wasn't built for passion. It was built for He even joked that maybe it was his evil twin who caused all the trouble. But deep down, he knew. He didn't follow the rules. He wasn't quiet enough, wasn't obedient, wasn't grateful enough. I was outspoken about the art, but this is a business, and I acted like it wasn't. Because I was an actor. Dumb. I was a dumb actor. He reflected on how quickly fame came. First play, he was the lead. First film, he was because this isn't just Val's story. Something strange started happening around the late 90s. Val Kilmer faded from the spotlight between 1998 and 1999. But he wasn't alone. Mel Gibson, Wesley Snipes, Brendan Fraser. One by one, they started disappearing too. Mel, once the undisputed king of the box office, suddenly couldn't get a studio to call him back, unless he paid for the film himself. Wesley Snipes, thrown in prison over tax issues, blamed on his accountant. Brendan Fraser, he spoke up about being assaulted and then vanished from major roles. Coincidence? The internet doesn't think so. And honestly, neither do we. Even Mel Gibson began to notice something was off. In a 1998 interview, he admitted he felt paranoid, that there were patterns he couldn't explain. There was a lot I couldn't understand, he said. Nobody explained it. And that's the thing about Hollywood. It never needs to say anything out loud, because silence in the right places can be louder than any blacklist. To Mel Gibson, Hollywood started to feel like one of those old Western saloons, the kind where a stranger walks in and suddenly everything goes quiet. People stop talking. They stare, not with curiosity, but with a warning, as if to say, "Don't go near that house on the hill." At first, Mel told himself he was being paranoid, just his imagination running wild. But years later, he realized he wasn't paranoid. He was right. And then came 1999, a year that in hindsight feels almost cursed. That year, Stanley Kubrick released Eyes Wide Shut, a film drenched in symbolism, masks, rituals, secret societies. A movie that didn't just feel mysterious. It felt like a mirror, a reflection of something dark, something hidden beneath Hollywood's glossy surface. And just as he was finishing the final cut, Kubrick died, suddenly, unexpectedly. And almost immediately after his death, 25 minutes of footage were mysteriously removed from the film. To this day, no one knows what was cut, but people have their theories. And guess who else disappeared in 1999? Val Kilmer. It's hard not to connect the dots. And speaking of masks, think about his version of Batman. Kilmer's Batman wasn't slick or smooth. He was distant, haunted, a man wearing a mask not just to fight crime, but to hide. From what? Maybe that wasn't acting. Maybe it was personal. Maybe Kilmer was trying to tell us something. And he wasn't just everything. Quietly, constantly, home videos, set footage, candid moments, almost like he knew. One day he might need receipts. In 2021, we finally got to see it. His documentary Val was more than a memoir. It was a record, a vault of memories. I have thousands of hours of tapes and film reels, he says in the film, from my life, my career. And then came the moment that still haunts viewers. A voice off camera tells him, "Shut the video camera off." Val answers, softly but firmly, "I'll keep it on until we're in rehearsal." That wasn't defiance. That was resistance. Watching that film doesn't feel like watching a celebrity reminisce. It feels like watching a man fight to stay visible, to not be erased, not just from Hollywood, but from history. And here's where it gets chilling. Around the time Kilmer began fading from the spotlight, a darker shadow was spreading through Hollywood. It wasn't a movie script, it was real. There were whispers about flights, black books, a certain island no one dared name, but everyone recognized. The timing? Uncanny. Did Val Kilmer get invited to something and say no? Did he speak up when silence was expected? Was he simply not playing the game the way others did? We may never know for sure, but the pattern is there. Too many stars vanished during that same era, and most of them had one thing in common. They didn't stay silent. Now, to truly understand what happened next, we need to rewind the clock back to 2015. It all started back in 2015, when the first draft of Sound of Freedom was written, a film based on the real-life mission of former Homeland Security agent Tim Ballard, who dedicated his life to rescuing children from trafficking rings. It should have been a no-brainer, a gripping, heroic story, a clear moral message, the kind of movie any major studio would jump at. Right, wrong. Despite wrapping filming by 2018, Sound of Freedom was passed around like a hot potato. Nobody wanted to touch it. For 5 years, it sat on a shelf, gathering dust. Why? Well, that's where things start to get suspicious. Originally, it was supposed to be released by 20th Century Fox, but in 2019, Disney bought Fox. And with it, the rights to the film. And what did they do? They buried it, locked it away, tucked it in a vault like it never existed. Now pause for a second. This is a movie about saving children. And Disney, a company that built its empire on childhood magic, decided to shelve it. That's when people started raising eyebrows, whispers turned into questions, and then came Mel Gibson, the industry's black sheep, always loud, always controversial, but also always digging into the shadows no one else would touch. Since the late 90s, Mel's been making cryptic, sometimes chaotic, sometimes frighteningly accurate remarks about the darker corners of Hollywood. He once described it as a twisted small town where everyone knows the secret, but no one dares speak it. One of the most disturbing things he ever revealed, a high-profile producer, he didn't name names, allegedly said, "Women in film, either naked or dead, both is better." Mel wasn't just venting, he was warning us. Over the years, he's spoken out about how Hollywood objectifies women, exploits children, and protects predators. So when Sound of Freedom finally clawed its way to the surface, independently released, Mel's support wasn't just promotional, it was personal. And then, something unexpected happened. This small, controversial indie film, made on a shoestring $14 million budget, exploded. Nearly $100 million worldwide. Packed theaters, grassroots energy, word of mouth on fire. But here's the kicker. The mainstream media, dead silent, or worse, openly hostile. Outlets like CNN, Rolling Stone, and The Guardian didn't just ignore the film, they ridiculed it, called it conspiracy bait. No serious discussion, no honest critique, just dismissal. Because at this point, it wasn't about the film, it was about what it represented. And while all of this was unfolding, Mel Gibson was still fighting, desperately, to stay in the game. He's been championing Lethal Weapon 5, calling it the best script in the entire franchise. It's written, it's ready, but no one wants to make it. And even Mel admits, he has no idea why. But let's be real. It has nothing to do with the script, and everything to do with his name, the risk, the controversy, the label, too much baggage. And that's the real frustration, because let's be honest, there are people in Hollywood who've done far worse, and still walked right back into the spotlight like nothing ever happened. So why not Mel? Why is he still on the outside, while others with far darker pasts get welcomed back with red carpets and standing ovations? Well, interestingly, a few voices have stood by him. Robert Downey Jr., the comeback king himself, famously vouched for Mel when no one else would. He didn't just defend him, he demanded Hollywood give him another shot. More recently, Andrew Garfield, while promoting Hacksaw Ridge, which Mel directed, spoke up too. "Everyone deserves second, third, even fourth chances," Garfield said. But for Mel Gibson, that second chance still feels out of reach, still locked behind closed doors. Why? Maybe it's politics. Maybe it's power. Maybe it's a system that punishes the loud and protects the silent. But whatever the reason, Mel Gibson and Val Kilmer share one unshakable truth. They both refuse to stay quiet. And maybe, just maybe, that was their real crime. Because here's where the story takes a darker turn. Mel Gibson didn't just say Val's career faded because he got older or because he got sick. No, he hinted at something deeper, something far more sinister. According to Mel, Val Kilmer didn't just fall from grace. He was pushed because he saw too much. He asked the wrong questions. He didn't sign the contract, not the legal one, but the spiritual one. The unspoken agreement that says, "We'll give you the fame, the power, the spotlight, but you give us your silence." And Val, he wasn't about to sell his soul. He wasn't going to be a puppet. And so the doors closed. A man who once headlined blockbuster after blockbuster became a ghost in his own industry. Scripts stopped arriving. Phones stopped ringing. Directors who once praised him as a genius acted like they didn't know his name. Even the media, always starving for drama, flipped the narrative. He wasn't brilliant anymore. Now, he was difficult. Not intense, just egotistical. Not misunderstood, just washed up. The public was fed a version of the story that made it all seem simple. He wasn't blacklisted, he was just stepping back. But Mel painted a different picture, one that looked less like retirement and more like exile. He believed Val Kilmer didn't vanish because of the rules. the hidden ones, the dangerous ones. And in Hollywood, breaking those rules comes at a cost. The same shadowy system Mel Gibson's been calling out for decades allegedly turned its back on Val Kilmer for doing the one thing Hollywood hates most, refusing to comply. And now, people are finally starting to connect the dots. Was it really about ego? Or was it about exposure? Did Val's refusal to stay silent make him a threat? Seen now, knowing everything we know, and it doesn't feel like a return. It feels like a farewell, a soft, fragile, heartbreaking goodbye. And that voice, that emotional exchange between Iceman and Maverick, it wasn't even his real voice. It was reconstructed using artificial intelligence, old recordings, and sheer determination because Val wanted to do that scene. He needed to, but behind the camera, he was fighting a silent war. Every day on set left him drained. Every line was a battle. It wasn't just the cancer anymore, it was everything. His body was breaking down. His spirit was holding on, barely. And then, after Maverick, he went quiet. Too quiet. No interviews, no appearances, just gone from public life. People assumed he was finally at peace, enjoying the calm after a stormy career. But that wasn't peace. That was disappearance. Slow, painful, silent. His friends noticed first. Calls went unanswered. Texts left on read or never delivered. Even close family said they hadn't seen him in months. But no one pressed too hard because he was Val Kilmer, the enigma, the artist, the man who turned isolation into a kind of poetry. So people told themselves, that's just Val being Val. But this wasn't solitude. This was someone slipping away. And then came April 1st. The world woke up to the news. Val Kilmer had died. At first, many hoped it was just a sick April Fool's joke, a hoax, a misunderstanding. But it wasn't. He was gone. The official cause? Pneumonia. But if you know Hollywood, you know pneumonia is their favorite euphemism. A soft, clean label for something that doesn't want to be examined too closely, because too many names have disappeared under the same circumstances. Kim Porter, Heavy D. Andre Harrell, all gone. All reportedly from natural causes, heart attacks or pneumonia. But the whispers behind the scenes, they tell a different story. Let's take Kim Porter, Diddy's ex. Official cause, pneumonia. But her first coroner's report ruled it a homicide. Toxins found in her system. Not enough to make headlines, but just enough to raise eyebrows. Andre Harrell, heart attack, but no warning signs. Heavy D, found face down, gone suddenly. It's almost like there's a script, a pre-written exit plan, neat, clean, convenient, for those who get too close, too loud, too awake, too brave, and maybe Val Kilmer was one of them. So when Val's autopsy came back, people looked closer. Yes, he had cancer. That was public knowledge. But the report revealed more than just illness. It told the story of a man slowly wasting away, lingering infections from old surgeries, never treated, signs of severe malnutrition, muscle loss, chronic pain, and not just physical pain, emotional too. He was on heavy prescription painkillers, not enough to overdose, but enough to say, I'm in agony every single day. The coroner noted something chilling. Some of the infections could have been treated, but they weren't. Because Val didn't ask for help, he wasn't speaking up, he wasn't letting anyone in. The same man who once lit up the screen was now sitting in the shadows, fighting a silent war that no one could see. He had his children, his journals, his paints, but also his isolation. He was pulling back, drawing inward, maybe preparing for the end. And then there was the Batman video. Just days before he passed, Val posted a tribute. At the time, it felt sweet. Looking back, it feels like a farewell. His body looked fragile, but there was peace in his eyes, something final in his smile. I have an animal for us, he said softly. It's been a while, and it had. But now that clip feels like more than nostalgia. It feels like the closing page of a book we didn't realize was ending. Because Val Kilmer wasn't just a movie star. He was a whistleblower in disguise. A man who wore a cape on screen and carried a burden off it. He dared to say no in an industry built on yes men. He questioned what you weren't supposed to question. He stepped back, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. Because sometimes silence is the only shield left. And if Val Kilmer was blacklisted for speaking up, then what does that say about those who stayed silent? Who else made that deal? Who else traded truth for survival? Maybe Kilmer's silence wasn't weakness. Maybe it was strategy. His last line of defense against a machine that tried to grind him down. And now, we're left with the aftermath. A loss that feels heavier than expected, a goodbye that doesn't feel complete, and a haunting question that lingers in every frame of Maverick, every quiet post, every piece of art he left behind. What really happened to Val Kilmer? Comment below, tell us what you think. And if this shook you, you're not alone, but you're definitely going to want to watch our next video.